Over the past few decades, America has created millions of millionaires. But the strange part is, most of them don't describe themselves as rich. Rather, we seem to have created an entirely new financial class, what we would describe as middle-class wealthy. Those households that often have, say, $1 million to maybe $3 million as a net worth. Their lives don't look the way we traditionally imagine it. They drive normal cars, live in normal neighborhoods. They worry about healthcare costs. They worry about retirement income. And yes, they consider themselves middle class. And yet, many of these households are already in the uppermost tier of wealth in this country. For instance, median U.S. household net worth is roughly $192,000. A net worth of about $1.9 million places a household in the top 10%, and around $3.8 million places a household in the top 5%.
So, a household with roughly a $2 million net worth is already ahead of about 90% of American households. Yet those in this group often don't describe themselves as rich or wealthy, and that's often because what we look at as wealthy or what we accept to be wealthy has changed over time. For decades, becoming a millionaire symbolized extraordinary wealth, but of course, inflation has drastically changed that benchmark. $1 million in 1985 would be the equivalent of more than $3 million today in terms of purchasing power. So what once represented the elite now is simply the result of consistent saving and investing over the course of an entire lifetime. And much of this wealth isn't really visible. It's likely tied up in retirement accounts or home equity. And interestingly, even if someone had $3 million sitting in an account ready to deploy at any moment today, they still might feel more financially cautious than someone who had $1 million at the ready in 1985. Because today's households tend to carry more of the financial responsibility themselves, many more people have to support a greater portion of their retirement income from their portfolio because fewer households have a pension. Healthcare costs are greater today than they were in the past, and market volatility can feel personal. When your entire life savings is invested in the market and the market is volatile, these large swings can be hard to stomach. And the larger your portfolio is, the more painful these swings are. Watching a $10,000 portfolio drop by $1,000, that's mildly painful. But watching $1 million portfolio drop by $100,000, that's an entirely different animal. And longevity is a greater risk as well. People are living longer, which means you very well may have a retirement that goes 30 years or more. In the past, maybe it felt like much of this risk was shared with a pension system from a previous employer. But now, it feels like much of the risk just sits squarely on your shoulders. Which brings us to one of the primary reasons this new class has emerged. There are actually several structural changes in the U.S. economy that have quietly created millions of households with seven-figure net worths. Over the past several decades, the U.S. retirement system shifted away from pensions and towards 401ks and individual retirement accounts. That shift has had a profound impact on how wealth shows up in people's lives because much of the wealth is tied up in retirement accounts. It's not showing up in visible lifestyle spending. A very common household today might look something like this: $1.2 million in a 401k, $300,000 in home equity, $150,000 in brokerage savings. That household has a $1.7 million net worth. And yet, their entire life might look very middle class because the vast majority of their wealth is tied up in retirement accounts that are meant for the future. And realistically, this is how these accounts are supposed to function. When someone contributes to a 401k, they're not buying a more luxurious lifestyle. They're buying financial security. They're buying their future independence. Which means retirement accounts have quietly helped create millions of millionaires, even if those households don't necessarily look wealthy from the outside. Another major driver of this has been housing. In many parts of the country, homeowners who bought homes years ago and simply held on to them benefited from enormous appreciation of their property values. For example, a home purchased for $350,000, now worth, say, $850,000, that increase alone can create $500,000 of wealth without any lifestyle change. If you purchased a home 20 or 30 years ago and stayed put and captured that appreciation, that absolutely matters from a wealth standpoint. Your home is an incredibly valuable asset. Now, can you build wealth without owning a home? Yes, absolutely. But know that without owning a home, that burden heavily shifts to your own savings discipline. Because for many people, a home acts as a forced savings account. And if you don't have that money that you're setting aside, paying towards this mortgage, building equity over time, know that you intentionally have to take money, put it into your savings, put it into your investment, and intentionally grow that on your own. So, while homeownership certainly isn't the only path to wealth for millions of families, it is one of the main drivers they have reached this seven-figure net worth status. Markets have also played a major role since the financial crisis of 2008 to 2009. The United States has experienced one of the longest and strongest bull markets in history. Over time, steady contributions combined with strong market growth has turned households into millionaires. Since the 1990s, the number of millionaires in the U.S. has tripled. And I think this is very important because, culturally, we tend to have this very narrow story that we tell about wealth. We tend to think of those who are wealthy as those with the most prestigious jobs, the very elite job titles, or the one with the most visible career. But in reality, that is not the only nor the most common path to wealth. If you've been a diligent saver and investor, steadily contributing, staying invested, and letting time do its work, it is absolutely possible to build significant wealth through disciplined habits alone. And that is one of the biggest reasons this group has grown so much. Now here's the interesting part. Even though these households may feel financially secure or even asset-rich, they still feel middle class, and there's a number of reasons for that as well. Part of this is simply that the image of wealth has become incredibly distorted. For most of human history, your comparison group was pretty small. It was your neighbors, your coworkers, other people in your community. But now we have the entire world in our pocket through the internet. Instead of comparing ourselves to someone down the street, we're comparing ourselves to someone who lives 1,000 miles away in a mansion, buying a six-figure car, flying private, vacationing on a yacht, and this has shifted how we think about rich, and it's changed how we think about wealth. Social media has completely distorted our understanding of what it means to be doing well financially. These platforms are bad for mental health. They pull you away from actually living your life. If there's one piece of advice here, it would be to put your phone down and go outside, because wealth in real life looks way more ordinary than the version we see online. So let's take a closer look at these middle-class wealthy households, because even though many of them have seven-figure account balances, they still feel financially cautious. First, it's important to consider the spendability of this money. For many households, especially those who've accumulated wealth slowly over a 30 or a 40-year career, much of their wealth is sitting parked inside a retirement account. And if you've spent entire decades saving and investing and slowly building this wealth, you don't reach a certain age, say 62, and step away from the workforce and suddenly tell yourself, hey, it's time to let loose. Your entire life has likely been built around the habit of saving and budgeting and being careful with money. That doesn't disappear overnight simply because you have a higher account balance. And it's likely you look at that account balance and you don't just see a number. Rather, you see an entire lifetime of effort behind that number. You see time spent working, vacations you skipped, upgrades you passed on, the sacrifices that made it all possible. Another reason middle-class wealthy households remain cautious is the challenge of turning a portfolio into a paycheck. Once your regular paycheck disappears, your portfolio has a completely different role. Now, it is your portfolio's job to support you for the next 20, 30, or more years. Research might suggest that with a $2 million portfolio, you could withdraw around $120,000 annually, combined with Social Security reaching $160,000 to $170,000 per year. But once human behavior enters the picture, people act differently. They are far more cautious. Many withdraw only 1 to 2% and rely heavily on Social Security, treating their investments as a safety net rather than income. Healthcare and longevity risk also play a major role in this cautious mindset. People retiring today might need their savings to last more than 30 years. Healthcare costs often rise faster than inflation, around 4 to 6% annually. Long-term care can exceed $100,000 per year. This uncertainty leads many to hold tightly to their wealth out of fear of future expenses. A practical approach is setting aside a dedicated healthcare fund to cover these potential costs, allowing more freedom to spend elsewhere. For those still in their working years, much of their wealth may be inaccessible. It may be tied up in retirement accounts or home equity. So even with a 7-figure net worth, daily life still feels middle class because that wealth isn't liquid or usable. So how do ordinary households become middle class wealthy? The answer is simple, but not easy. It requires discipline over long periods of time. They save consistently, treating it as non-negotiable. They maintain emergency funds to avoid debt. They invest long-term in diversified portfolios and stay invested through market cycles. Many own homes and benefit from long-term appreciation. And importantly, their spending rises slower than their income, creating a gap that fuels wealth building. That gap between income and spending is where financial independence grows. And while these habits are simple, they require consistency. Time is the most important factor. Over decades, these habits produce extraordinary results. There's also a psychological side. Many who build wealth struggle to switch from saving to spending, but wealth isn't just about accumulation. It's about enjoying the freedom it provides. That might mean allocating money for experiences, gradually increasing spending, or simply allowing yourself to enjoy life more. Put all of this together, and it becomes clear. Millions of households are financially secure, asset-rich, yet living ordinary lives. Wealth today often looks like a paid-off home, a strong retirement account, modest spending, and financial independence. Not luxury, not extravagance, but stability and freedom. Real wealth is quiet. Real wealth is security. Real wealth is freedom. And increasingly, real wealth looks like middle-class wealthy.